So, today we're talking about the global environmental outlook. This is a series of reports that was compiled and produced by the UN Environmental Programme. The initial report was produced in 1997. Since then, there have been a further 5 reports. GEO reporting includes regional and sub-regional environmental assessments, as well as an annual environmental statement which highlights important events which have impacted the environment, both positively and negatively. In effect, the GEO reports serve as a guideline for adjusting policy and action to ensure that consistent progress is made towards long-term environmental goals. In addition, the GEO reports address specific interest groups, such as cities and business or industry, and demonstrate how each specific group is impacting and will be impacted by the tracked environmental change. Contained in the GEO toolkits are useful frameworks for countries and cities for analyzing change and impact in key areas such as health, ecosystems, climate, water, and cities. The main takeaway or message of the GEO6 report is that the current collective policy of countries in the world is inadequate and will not facilitate the achievement of the UN sustainability goals by 2030. The report urges more radical reform and action on the part of government and policymakers to ensure that milestones are achieved. There are complementary agreements, policy, and legislation, such as the Kyoto Protocol. This agreement was adopted at the COP3 UN conference in 1997 and to date has been ratified by 191 countries. The aim of the Kyoto Protocol is to reduce global carbon emissions to a level where harmful atmospheric climate change will not take place. However, the negotiated reductions for individual countries do not aggregate amount to the intended goal. Furthermore, land use change and forestry goals can be used in lieu of carbon reduction. There is also the Paris Agreement, and the ultimate goal of the Paris Agreement is to prevent the global temperature increase from exceeding 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and over time to reduce the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Countries were called upon to embrace the 2020-20 targets, meaning a reduction in carbon emissions of 20%, a 20% increase in renewable energy market share, as well as a 20% energy efficiency increase. Each country was allowed to determine its own pledge, though, and criticism as of 2017 has concluded that no country is honoring its commitments. In fact, countries have made almost no progress towards their pledges. The African Union's policy on the environment has focused on a few specific continental goals. At the top of the list is combating desertification, which is a problem impacting Saharan Africa and some parts of Southern Africa. The other goals are the protection of forests, safeguarding water supply, improving meteorological data collection, and enhancing member state capacity to implement environmental policy. The Southern African Democratic Community has chosen to adopt a simplified environmental policy with just 3 goals in the hope that a more achievable total goal will result. The 3 focus areas are waste management, air quality, and protection of biodiversity. In terms of South Africa, the National Environmental Management Act, aka NEMA, was introduced in 1997. The act has adopted the principle of the user pays, which means that the perpetrators of environmental damage must bear the cost of rehabilitation. Individuals and companies are required to take active steps to avoid overt damage or pollution to the environment. In addition, the act requires provinces and local governments to create environmental management plans and to create their own bylaws that detail punishment and remedial action on the part of the offenders. Towns and cities have an obligation to create environmental plans and bylaws that lend practical implementation and management to the broader national environmental policy. An environmental plan must also be integrated with the local spatial development plan and all other land use documents. The South African Local Government Association, aka SALGA, has determined key focus areas for local government, which are listed on the current slide. SALGA has also determined a set of challenges to be addressed with urgency. Firstly, historically, environmental awareness campaigns have not focused on behavioral change and educating people on how to adapt their behavior. Many small towns lack professional or qualified environmental practitioners. Finally, many municipalities have focused on waste management and have largely ignored other concerns such as conservation and biodiversity protection. The environment is one of four pillars that form the foundation of sustainable urban planning. Creating a balance between the economic, social, institutional, and environmental needs of a city is critical for long-term stability. The United Nations projects that by 2050, 68% of the world's population will live in urban areas. As it stands, cities are already the largest contributors to air pollution, waste, and carbon emissions. As it stands, cities are already the largest contributors to air pollution, waste, and carbon emissions. Cities also consume more energy and water compared to rural areas. As a result, the burden of addressing environmental challenges falls heavily on the shoulders of cities. National level government has a role to play, but the pressures, both social and economical, that are driving environmental impact are disproportionately centered on urban areas, and as such, local government is forced to play a key role in environmental strategy, policy, and enforcement. The GEO6 report echoes this sentiment by describing megatrends, which are rapid urbanization and the pressure to provide healthcare, housing, education, and jobs in cities as urban populations expand at an increasing rate. This naturally has a knock-off effect for local governments concerned with pollution, waste management, and preserving biodiversity. The effects of desertification and deforestation, as well as loss of biodiversity on human well-being, are also documented in the GEO6 report. This provides a link to the African Union and the SADC goals. However, it is at the local government level where policy and law has the greatest potential impact. The megatrends are primarily addressed through city-level planning and law. It is through city spatial planning and land use management that an appropriate balance must be sought between creating space for housing, economic expansion, while simultaneously protecting biodiversity and green space. Cities are also responsible for permitting industrial, water, and electricity connections, waste management, chemical permits, and a range of environmental health certificates and approvals. To a large extent, any agreed goal or target in international conferences or treaties would need to be monitored and enforced mainly in cities and the immediate surrounding areas. The functions of a city make it clear that it is cities that need to drive the agenda to move towards renewable energy, cleaner production processes, and push more energy efficient buildings and developments. South Africa is an intermediate country but still developing in many areas. It is a country that has very high levels of inequality and unemployment, and like with many countries in the developing world, economic growth is seen as paramount. Opinion can be divided on whether continuous economic growth is essential in developed countries, but there's a broad consensus that when it comes to developing economies, economic growth is vital. The UN calculated a rough cost for the countries to comply with Kyoto Protocol 2020 goals, and it is estimated that countries would have to spend approximately 0.5% of their GDP to implement and achieve the measures required for the 2020 goals. However, economists have also raised concerns over the growth potential that could also be lost by pursuing more aggressive environmental goals. These financial and economic concerns may well be impacting South Africans' commitment to agreements such as the Paris and Kyoto Protocol. Environmental goals that impact heavy industry and energy are given far less focus by South Africa compared to waste management and green space/biodiversity protection. This is prevalent at a local government level. The protection of wetlands, biodiversity, and green space has found its way onto the day-to-day approval and planning processes in cities, but the reduction of carbon emissions and exploring renewable energy is largely overlooked. The ethical push to acknowledge environmental impact in South Africa is ever present, but the broader concerns regarding global warming and climate change has not found its way into practical enforcement, certainly not in a meaningful, consistent manner. In short, the main constraints or perceived constraints are the need for jobs, housing, and economic growth. To date, South Africa has made efforts to introduce environmental planning. It seeks to capacitate small municipalities and enhance its overall data collection capacities. Environmental efforts have been focused on protecting pre existing forests, biodiversity, green space, and improving waste management and recycling. South Africa has been found wanting. Together with most countries, though, when it comes to honoring global goals linked to reducing carbon emissions and global warming. Economic concerns and fears regarding growth may as well be the biggest contributing factors in countries being reluctant to commit to binding agreements that carry penalties. However, failure to commit to broader goals will eventually impact all facets of human life, and these challenges cannot be avoided for much longer. It is generally acknowledged after tracking progress or lack thereof that the Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement were paid lip service. The opportunity for countries to address issues of climate change are limited by time, and South Africa and the world must acknowledge that we have fallen very short of tackling some of the major issues of our generation. Future generations may find it too late to respond.